Welcome to our webinar about how to write sentences and paragraphs for your thesis. I hope that we can present some interesting ideas, not only interesting, but I would say useful ideas for you to improve your academic writing. Okay, and as usual, let's begin with a quote. Adam's quote makes us reflect on how far good writing is from improvisation, especially academic writing. If you are imaginative and know how to write, your approach writing is in a well-prepared and organized way. Why? Because you know the different variables involved and the demands that have to be satisfied. So it's not a matter of writing fast, it's a matter of writing well. And that implies knowledge, practice, and reflection. Today we will present an aspect of the academic writing task. And this is our agenda for today. Our focus is to discuss the different levels of academic writing, especially when writing a thesis or dissertation, and suggest you some steps to approach them. Welcome, Timothy. So, if you look at the agenda, you will see that we are going to talk about different levels of academic writing. And let's begin exactly by presenting the levels involved in writing a thesis or a dissertation. How you go from the blank page to a draft. As we discussed in the webinar about organizing ideas for your writing, writing is conceived as a process of generating and editing text within a set of constraints, and that makes it a problem-solving task. One that usually requires to alter previous decisions in order to solve the problem in a more effective way. Therefore, it is not a linear process, since once you write something, you evaluate it in terms of its clarity, power to reflect your ideas, and achievement of the established goals. However, in order to go from the blank page to a draft, you have to first clarify in your mind the ideas that you want to communicate and then begin writing them. But where to begin doing that? It seems logical to start by the simplest level and then advance to the most complex one. That's why we have the levels represented in the stairs of the slide. Timothy, can't you hear? What about the rest of you? Can you hear me? Okay, so let's write Timothy to check. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. As we will see today, each of those levels has its own demands, but their common element is that they all have the same goals. The cohesion and consistency of the presented information and their compliance with the rules established for the kind of academic text you are writing. Two goals that you need to keep in mind. Right now, you may think, Dr. Sanchez is assuming that I don't know how to write. How come? I'm a graduate student and I have written lots of text. I certainly know how to write sentences, paragraphs, and even chapters. Of course you do. However, when dealing with academic writing at graduate level, and especially with a thesis or a dissertation, you have to perform at such a high level that you need all the possible help to do the expected work. If you have majored in linguistics, this help is not necessary, but if not, believe me, you need it. Okay? And where to begin is the question that emerges now. As I said before, the sentence level seems to be the logical answer. And you may ask, why? Here you have the answer. Sentences are the main elements people use to communicate their ideas. You may think that words are the main elements, and under special circumstances, you can express yourself only with isolated words. However, putting words together into sentences is the usual and most productive way to communicate ideas. So that's why we need to begin the writing process at the sentence level. And as the slide says, don't assume that you already know all its peculiarities. Okay? Now, let's go into the sentence level of writing. We will approach it from the point of view of the types of sentences that are available for you to express your ideas when writing an academic text. The first category of sentences you can use is the simple sentences. They have two main elements, a subject, or who or what you talk about, and a predicate, or what you say about the subject. Please check the sample sentence. It is important to state that each simple sentence expresses a complete thought and consequently is an independent clause. It doesn't need any other element to be understood. Some students usually say, okay, then that's all I need to use in order to write academic text. Wrong. If you use only simple sentences, the flow of ideas will be odd, and it will resemble, you know what? The sound of chicken pecking. Therefore, you will need more types of sentences. Timothy, perhaps if you change your browser to another one, perhaps the problem is solved. Okay, sorry, I lost my mind a little. Okay, the second category of sentences is the compound ones. Please check the example presented. They are called compound because they are made linking two simple sentences by means of a coordinator, which is a word that associates others of equal importance. Welcome, Adrian. Then, the two simple sentences associated have the same importance, but they don't necessarily express similar ideas. The ideas can be even opposite, as you can realize when you look at the fun boys. Look at the fun boys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Okay? Now you have simple sentences and compound ones in your toolkit. However, they are not enough to communicate the kind of complex ideas that are behind a thesis or a dissertation. You also need complex sentences, whose names comes from the fact that one part of the sentence explains, completes, clarifies, etc., the other part, and therefore it doesn't have the same importance. It provides additional information and is subordinated to an independent clause. Check the example presented. When you put together the subjects were in pre-established groups and they have been assigned to 2 advanced calculus courses, by means of because, you create a complex sentence in which the reason why the subjects were in pre-established groups is additional. It's an additional information in order to give you a more comprehensive idea of what happened. Other examples are, although the treatments were assigned at random, the subjects were in pre-established groups, and a regression analysis of the data was performed, which at the end provided a lot of significant relationship. For instance, in the last one, when you read which at the end provided a lot of significant relationship, that's an additional information. But what is important is that a regression analysis of the data was performed. Okay, is the toolkit of possible sentence structures complete? Not yet. Some ideas require a more complex type of sentences. They require the compound complex sentences. They have 2 independent clauses and 2 or more subordinated clauses that provide additional information, and those components are linked by coordinators and or subordinators. Please check the example presented. There we have 2 independent clauses. The study addressed validity threats. That's a complete idea. And the study took into account the possible effect of mediating variables, another complete idea. And they are linked by and, which is a coordinator that reflects their equal importance. Both of them are not only have an equal importance, but in this case, they even have equal trend of meaning. The 2 subordinated clauses, the one that gives additional information, are the subjects were not selected at random and the variables were controlled statistically. The subordinated use are although and which. So as you can see, this sentence expresses a lot of information in a coherent way, and it's a common example of what you read in thesis, dissertation, and research reports. So now you have a more complete toolkit to write the sentences of academic text. But how can you approach the task of actually writing them? Let's see. Here you have some suggestions that have been proved to be useful when writing the sentences of academic text. First of all, you have to know what you exactly want to express. This is an essential requirement. Without it, your problem will move from the grammar area to the semantic and cognitive one, and the idea will not be decoded as expected. Okay? You have to know what you want to say. Once you know exactly what you want to say, you need to choose the type of sentence that best reflects your idea. Is it just a single idea that requires a simple sentence? Does that idea have 2 equal components that can be expressed by a compound sentence? Or is there a basic idea that could be complemented or clarified including additional information, and therefore a complex sentence is suitable? Or perhaps, is it an idea with two equal components which can be complemented or clarified, including additional information that will require a compound complex sentence? That's something that you need to, that's a decision that you need to make before writing. When you know what to say and the most appropriate sentence structure, you should remember to be specific and concise. In other words, say what you want to say without redundancy or unnecessary words. That's something important in most academic text. You have to go directly to the idea that you want to express. Perhaps in some philosophical text, you may think that that's not the case, but when a person who knows philosophy reads those sentences, that person knows immediately what is the exact message that has been intending to say. And some students think they have this kind of reasoning. Well, I'm not quite sure I want to say, so I'm going to use a lot of words, and perhaps the professor doesn't get it, that I don't know what I want to say. Let me tell you something. We always know when you don't know what to say. So don't take that risk. And why you have to be specific and concise? Because your goals are to write coherently and consistently, as well as to reflect the characteristic of academic writing. To achieve those goals, you also need to connect the ideas so they flow smoothly. Coordinator, subordinator, and other transitional words help you do that. And we are going to talk about those transitional words in a minute. Graduate students need to say a lot of things, and at first sight, the complex and compound complex sentences seem to be the best tool. They are. But you know to be careful when linking clauses so the sentences have a reasonable amount of clauses. If you include too much information in just one sentence, you hinder understanding. And how much is too much? When there is no much additional information, the readers forget which clauses were the independent ones. So don't put too much details that people can forget what is the important thing that you are trying to say. If you need to include a lot of information, write more than one sentence. In thesis, dissertation, and research reports, passive voice is not widely used. Active voice is preferred, especially when talking about the subjects of the study, because passive voice suggests individuals are acting on instead of being actors. For example, the student completed the survey is preferable to the students were given the survey, or to the survey was administered to the students. When you are writing an academic text, therefore you should follow the rules established for that type of text. If not, your draft will be considered inadequate. And as I said before, the writing process includes reviewing, evaluating, and rewriting. You have to monitor your writing and change it accordingly. You have a very useful tool when connecting sentences and paragraphs. They are called methods of logical organization and help you achieve coherence. They refer to the different ways you can use to link information according to its meaning. The most common methods of logical organizations are, I'm going to give you short reminder of that. Chronological order. It is an arrangement of information according to time sequence. Such arrangement can be done following a possible order or a logical one. Sometimes we say, well, the logical thing to happen is that this happens first and then this happens later. Okay? Spatial order. It refers to an arrangement of information according to place or relationship in space. Very frequently, spatial order and chronological order go together. Classification. Items or data are grouped according to similarities and differences based on an established criterion. Some items can be classified in only one way, but most of them can be grouped in many different ways according to the criteria used. And that's something that you have to remember when you are creating your instruments to gather data, and also when you are analyzing data and establishing categories. Okay? If you change the criterion, you change the categories. So it's important to define the criteria that you are going to use to group elements before doing it. Okay? Comparison and contrast. Although they are two methods of logical organization, they are usually presented together due to their intimate relationship. Comparison is an estimate of likenesses and similarities, while contrast refers to differences and dissimilarities. Generalization and specifics. Generalization are statements that can be considered true and applicable to a wide range of situations. They are basically inferences derived from individual instances of a phenomenon. Generalization should also be supported or proved by providing specifics, facts, examples, statistics, experiences, etc. So that's something that you have to do when you are trying to make a conclusion, for instance. You have to make a generalization and provide the support for that. Or when you are trying to write an argument. Cause and effect. In this method of logical organization, a piece of information depends on the existence of another one. The relationship between them is one of dependence, and sometimes can be confused with one of chronological order because the cause always precedes the effect. But we should be careful because not every chronological sequence is in fact an instance of cause and effect. So it's necessary to determine the dependence of one item on another one. And prediction. This method of logical organization is one in which we make inferences focusing the future, but based on present events or phenomena. Although future cannot be foreseen accurately, it is possible to make logical inferences based on valid information. So you have to be careful when doing predictions because you still need to provide a kind of evidence that can be used to check if your prediction is logical or not. Well, all these methods are made evident by using transitional words that are single words or phrases like coordinators and subordinators that connect ideas. For example, to show a chronological order relationship between two sentences, you can signal words like after, simultaneously, or in the first place. Those are words that make evident to the reader that there is a relationship of chronological order. Similarly, You use signal words like because of that or since to make a cause-effect relationship evident. And remember that in academic writing, you should assure that ideas are interpreted as you expected them to be. So you need to be explicit in what you say. Okay, now the main idea of what we have already said is that you need to realize the role and importance of sentences and master their writing in order to produce high quality academic text. So do not underestimate your mastery of sentences. And now it's time to talk about the paragraph level. The first thing to point out is what a paragraph is and what characterizes it. As you can infer from the slide, a paragraph should function as a unit, and consequently, it should have only one focus, which is explicitly written in a main or topic sentence. Paragraphs are the bridge between sentences and chapters. Such role makes them the basic unit of academic writing. Why? Well, because they are the transformation of isolated sentences into coherent wholes, which can be connected to become sections and chapters that let us present and defend arguments. Imagine an academic text that is made of isolated sentences without any connection, without paragraph. Paragraphs are like the buildings of a well-planned city in which each building and construction has a connection to its surroundings to form a functional unit. So keep that idea in your mind when you reflect about paragraph. How can you approach the task of writing such an important element of academic text? Let's see some suggestions. The first three suggestions are focused on planning, which is not only the act of figuring out how to go from point A to point B, but it's mainly the act of creating an internal and abstract representation of the knowledge that will be used when writing the text. Planning has three sub-processes: generating ideas, organizing them, and translating them into actual writing. Organizing ideas is perhaps the key to write paragraphs, taking into account that your ideas are already generated and translated into sentences. So, putting those sentences into paragraphs requires to organize them according to only one focus, which is only one aspect of the focus of the section to which the paragraph belongs to. In other words, you define what the focus of the section is and then define the areas into which that focus could be divided. Each one of those areas will be the focus of one paragraph. To do that, it is advisable to create an outline or another organizing tool to summarize the different fascia of the section. That helps you assure coherence. There are, of course, more than one way of building a paragraph. However, as I said a lot of time before today, the middle paragraph has a simple and effective structure that is easy to remember and is widely used in academic writing. As you can see in the slide, each letter of the acronym refers to a part of the paragraph. Let's expand on each one of them a little. The topic sentence that expresses the main idea explain what the paragraph is about. And all sentences in the paragraph should have a direct connection to it. The more common mistake we can find in academic writing in relation to the main idea is that a paragraph discusses more than one main idea. Now, each paragraph must have only one focus or topic. Begin a new paragraph whenever you have a new idea or focus. The second element to include in a paragraph is the evidence that support what the main idea says. Remember that all your claims must be supported so the arguments can be considered valid and convincing. The most common mistake in relation to evidence is to provide evidence that does not support the claim because it refers to another topic. I believe that's a very common mistake in academic writing. So, it is not only a matter of providing citations, data, etc. The evidence must be related to the main idea and prove it. But leaving the evidence to speak by itself is a very risky action since you cannot be completely sure of how readers may interpret it. So you cannot just present the idea and present the evidence. You need to analyze it. You have to explain how evidence proves the main idea, and that cannot be done just restating or summarizing the evidence. It's not what you have to do. You have to point out the relationship and explain it. That's the way to avoid a common mistake when writing paragraph. Okay? So, if you look at the questions in the slide, how does the evidence support the main idea? How does it answer the question, so what? That's what you have to answer in that part of the paragraph. And the last element of a meal paragraph is the link. It can be approached as a conclusion about the main idea or as a connection between the paragraph and the argument of the section or the chapter or the whole thesis. It may also include a connection to the next paragraph. And this element helps create a text that is coherent since its ideas are connected and flow smoothly. The slide presents other things you need to remember when writing paragraph. Variety of sentence structure, number of sentences, use of transitional words, and reflection about unit, emphasis, coherence, and completeness make a good paragraph for academic text. Too much to pay attention to? Yes. But the more you practice, the easier to do that. So just do it. Okay? And now, let's have a look to the chapter level of writing in a thesis or dissertation. This is the most common, but not the only one, structure of a thesis or dissertation. You have to follow the structure that your university or supervisor has established to develop your work. Within those limits, I have some suggestions to approach the writing of a chapter. And here you have those suggestions. They reflect the idea that planning is an essential process of writing. Planning may save you a lot of time, effort, and disappointment. That's why planning the sections of the chapter and applying what we have already said about writing paragraphs and sentences are the basis of writing chapters. Paragraphs have to be connected among them according to the focus of the section, and sections linked according to the focus and goal of the chapter. Okay? Finally, the information in the slide is something useful to keep in mind when developing a chapter of your thesis or dissertation. As you can see, the notion of only one focus is also valid for the section of a chapter. Okay? And the main idea of today invites you to be aware of the importance that mastering the writing of sentences and paragraphs has for the development of a high-quality thesis or dissertation. You may have wonderful ideas. You may have created a study that is given a new light to your field of study, but if you are not able to reflect those ideas and all those findings in a coherent and consistent way that people can understand while reading, my dear, you have wasted your time. So it's a matter of having a content, but also it's a matter of having the form appropriate to reflect that content. Do not underestimate its importance and be sure of how much you actually master it. So here we have what is happening now at Doctoral Net, especially during this month. My next webinar will be how to choose sample for the research, and I'm going to finish May talking about that beautiful thing, which is critical thinking. There you have the links to get your Android app or your Apple app of Doctoral Net. And remember that we still have great webinars, and I'm telling you that I think that for fall, you are going to have a set of videos that each one lasts only 5 minutes, that you can check at the app, and I'm going to begin doing them with academic writing. So take that, put that into your mind. Sign up for our webinars, and if you cannot attend, you can have the recording and also the slides, and also you are going to have a PDF of the slides. And well, it's time to asking and answering questions, my dear. Feel free to ask your questions or make your comments or share your concerns. Timothy, could you solve your sound problem? Is everything so clear that you don't have questions? Wow. Want to risk reading my first chapter draft? Yeah, why not? Oh, thanks God, Timothy. But don't worry, because you are going to receive the link for the recording, so you can download the recording, and you have what you missed, okay? Any questions? If not, there are no questions. I'm going to stop the recording. Oh, okay. Joy says, could you say a little more about analysis in the meal plan? Yeah. You first make a claim, which is the main idea. And then you provide some evidence that could be data, or that could be other people's findings, or that could be other people's ideas. But what you need to do in the analysis section of the paragraph is to connect the claim of the main idea with the evidence. So the question is, how does this evidence prove or support the claim of the main idea? For instance, if you have provided data as a way of evidence for the claim, you cannot leave it there. The survey says this, or the results of the survey were that 50% of the subjects did this. You have to connect those things and say, and that means, for instance, and that means that a majority of the subjects consider this as in this way. And that's consistent to what this author have said, but it is opposite to what this author said. So in that part, in the analysis section of the paragraph, you reflect upon what is the relationship between the claim that you did in the main idea and the evidence that you provide. Why you need to do that analysis? Because if you just said, let me figure out something. For instance, the new teaching program is better than the previous one. And then that's the claim. And then you say, then the results of the study for the control group keeps the same, and there was an increase in the scores of the experimental group. And then you leave it there. What does it mean? It means, so what? What happened? You have to say, and that means that this new teaching program has improved the scores in this aspect, and that is related to this thing, and that is consistent to what this author has found. However, there is still some points that need to be researched a little more. That's how it happens. Is that clear, or does it answer your question, Joy? Okay, good. The chapter plan. Any advice? Is there a more efficient or better plan to put together a chapter? Well, good question. You need to define, my pleasure, Joy. You need to define a set of criteria for your chapter. For instance, how to put together the literature review chapter. First of all, you need to establish what is the goal, what is the objective that you want to achieve with the literature review. It usually is to present what is the state of art in relation to all the variables involved in the problem. You need to provide a clear and comprehensive picture of what happens in the study of all the variables that your problem is related to. So if that is the goal, then you need to make, let's say, an outline of the variables involved in your problem. And you say, okay, in my problem, I have, for instance, cognitive style, I have teaching style. Sorry for always talking about teaching, but I am a teacher, okay? Mathematics, knowledge, and you do a list of the variables that are involved and the relationship. What is the relationship between, for instance, mathematical knowledge and teaching knowledge? What has been studied about that? And then you make a list or an outline of what are you going to talk about first, and what you think that should comes after that, and then after that, and then after that. Each one of those is a section of your chapter. Okay. For instance, if you think about methodology chapter, okay, what is the goal of the methodology chapter? Is to provide a kind of guideline of how you conducted your study, so any reader can reproduce your study if that person wants. So they have a kind of guideline. And that means that since that is your goal, to achieve that goal, you need to talk about all the things that you did to conduct your study. And that means that you have to, first of all, restate the research questions or the objective of the research. Then you have to talk about population. You have to talk about sample that you use in your study. You have to talk about how you gather data. If you use instruments to gather that data, how do you create them, or you use some of them, and what were the procedures that you use. So you make a list of all the things that are involved in providing a clear guideline for any person to develop the exact study that you did, and then each one of those things is a section, and then you have to put them into order in a sense that makes the picture clear for the reader. Okay, so you have to put your mind into the mind of the reader and say, what should the reader want to read first? Perhaps the research questions. Why? Because all the thing that I'm doing here is to answer those questions. Okay. And then perhaps I have to provide information about the population that we are working with and that kind of things. Does it answer your question, Annalie? Okay. Okay, good. Now, Timothy said, I understand that there are organizational approaches other than the meal plan. Absolutely. However, I have not heard much about these guidelines. Could you talk about these other approaches to organization of writing? Yes. Well, you know that some people try to organize. I mean, the thing is that when you organize your ideas to write a paragraph, you need to know if you are doing it for academic writing or you are doing it for entertainment purposes and that kind of things. Okay? The thing is that when you are working with academic writing, you are expected to communicate your ideas following the characteristics of academic writing. Okay? And those characteristics include coherence, include formality, the use of formal language, the use of inferences, the different kinds of things, elements that you have to use. How can you use a different way that is not the meal paragraph? Well, the thing is that you have to be sure of the idea that you want to express. That's the common thing, the common element in any approach to write academic text. You can change the order. I mean, you can put the main idea at the end, for instance, of a paragraph. And that's possible because you can think, I may talk about the evidence first and then analyze that evidence, and then I can write down the main idea. That's an inductive way of doing it, and that's appropriate too. However, there is something that is important when you are writing academically, that is that you have to be sure, first of all, that your message is comprehended in the way that you want it to be. And second, that your audience is a very special one. They are people who are scholars like you, and that they expect things to move in a certain way. So it's not a bad way of writing in some parts of your thesis or in some of your paragraph, inductively write it down the paragraph. That's possible. Yep. Any other way of putting your ideas together? Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, academically speaking, I think that there is a constraint to do that. What the middle paragraph says is only put together a way that you can remember how to do that, how to write your paragraph. And it is easy in the way that you use the acronym and say, okay, for this and this and this. But you can change that, providing that you don't get out of the constraints that academic writer has established. Okay? Does it answer your question, Timothy? Welcome, Nikki. Do you have any other question? Or do you want more explanation about what I've said? Okay, Timothy. It's okay. You know, the thing with academic writing is that it is formal, that it has constraints, it has rules. Oh, no problem, Nikki. You can you are going to get the link for the recording, so I understand. Getting back to what I'm saying, the thing is that academic writing has rules. has constraints, and it has them for a reason, because the main purpose of writing in academic text is to express an argument and to convince people that your argument is valid, that your argument can be sustained, can be supported. So it's not like writing a novel or writing a blog or writing a short story in which you can move things in order to give an appropriate and a different atmosphere, a different environment, and different mood. No, academic writing is so formal. And think about the people who usually work with academic text. It's the same people that use a gun and put a lot of things for going to the university. For instance, when you go to Cambridge or Oxford, you use a different kind of dress. And it's the same people that goes to a convocation in a very formal dresses. Is the same people that sometimes can dress like hippies, but when you talk to them, they are formal in the way that they speak. So they are different, and your way of writing things should be according to their characteristic. Luz, you say, are there tips to practice on your writing, like some healthy daily practice or something like that? Yes. When you, the first thing or the first tip to improve your writing, your academic writing, is reading. Reading gives you the input to use the appropriate language, but also to the appropriate sentence structures, the appropriate style, okay? But not reading just for reading reflectively. That we have developed that topic in previous webinars, and we are going to continue doing that. But the thing is that you need to read many articles, many things, but not read it by reading them, but paying attention to how the paragraphs are developed, how the sections of a chapter are developed, and that kind of thing. How they analyze the data, and how they put together evidence in order to convince you that this is the thing. Okay, that's the first thing. The next thing is to practice a lot. And it means that each day, you can write down one paragraph, and let's suppose that at the beginning of the week, you write down a list of 6. We're not going to say 7, because you need to go to the gym and you need to go to the beach and that kind of thing. But you can write down 6 topics or 6 main ideas to develop 6 paragraphs. And then each day you take just 30 minutes, it's no more than that, 30 minutes, and you begin to reflect upon that claim, upon that main idea, and you say, okay, how can I write this main idea? And you write it down. And then you say, what is the evidence? I have this, this, and this. Which one I put first? Which one I put second? And then how is the relationship between those 2 things, and how I can finish this. And you practice. And once you write the paragraph, you reread it. And you check if the ideas flow smoothly. Not in your mind, because you know you created it and you have an extra knowledge, but from the point of view of any reader, you can either give it to another person and say, please read this and tell me what you understand. And then if there is something that is not working properly, you go back, you analyze why it doesn't work in the way that you expected. Did you use the correct terms? Did you use the most appropriate sentence structure? Okay, and then you rewrite based on that analysis. You change your decision and rewrite the paragraph. That's the best way of doing it. Okay, you can also read something, a paragraph, and then say, how can I paraphrase this paragraph? And you write down the same ideas in a different way. And then you check if the relationships in the original paragraph are the same and in the one that you paraphrase. And you know what? That is a very, very good exercise to do citations in your thesis, in your dissertation. Because when you read a dissertation in which all citations are direct citation, paste, cut and paste, you feel that the person who wrote that dissertation does not really work and understood the ideas. So you need to paraphrase some citation, and instead of using quotation marks, you paraphrase the idea and then you include the citation. That's a good way of improving your academic writing, paraphrasing, and always give it to another person that can read both of those paragraphs. Or you can even give one to one person, the original one, and the paraphrase one to another person, and then say, okay, what do you understand? And see if they both understood the same. Any other question? My pleasure, Luz. My pleasure, Mark. If you want, send me your chapter, and I can give it a quick look. Okay. Okay. Let me stop the recording, and once again, thank you for registering for my webinars.